Welcome to the Pod Band Pipecast, the premier pipe band podcast.
2 for 2, yeah.
Nicely
Two
done.
for Todd.
2 for Todd. Welcome back, everyone. Because we know you're back because you listened to the last week's episode. Because if you didn't, then we wouldn't be welcoming you back. We're not even welcoming you. Go back and listen to it.
Then you can be welcomed.
Yeah. And then you will feel like you deserve that welcome back.
You have to earn that welcome.
Yeah. Not just giving out welcomes over here.
That's not how we roll.
No.
Not how we welcome.
So welcome back, because we are back, and we're still talking to Todd Norris, not to be confused with Chuck Norris, his uncle. I'm just going to keep saying that.
I've already made that joke.
But it's funny. It's a funny joke.
It's good.
It may
You're
not
15.
be that funny,
Yes.
but
No, I'm kidding.
I'm sure there's at least one
Don't make me
15-year-old.
tell the story of my freshman year in PE class in high school.
Yeah, you have to tell it.
Well,
Okay, I was super scrawny, and when the freshman PE class was in there, the upperclassmen had their systematics working out class, and then you had to write your name on your shirt and everything. So they saw Norris, and a bunch of these big guys start coming around. Hey, any relation to Chuck? And somehow I managed to just totally straight face and say, well, yeah, he's my uncle. And then I just stared at him. And they stared back at me for a while, waiting for me to crack or whatever. And miraculously, I didn't. And they were just like, cool. All right. Well, okay, guys, let's go. So that was brilliant. It was one of my only acting feats, and it happened at a good time. So there you have it. From that on point in 1981, Chuck Norris was my uncle.
Yep.
that's, yeah. Now it's real.
Whether he
It's
knows it or
canon
not.
All right. So we're back with Todd. You already know Todd because you already heard his previous episode. But yeah, he's going to tell us about, not only is he a drummer extraordinaire in Scottish snare drumming, but a drummer extraordinaire. I'm full of jokes today. It's great. He is also a drummer extraordinaire with at least one other kind of drumming that I know of. Maybe we'll find out.
Yeah, we'll find out
more. No
Tell us.
spoilers.
Tell us what else you're an extraordinaire at.
Well, I think the word extraordinaire or extraordinaire might be a bit too much hype. I'll let other people decide that. But like I mentioned before, I did start doing percussion in grade school and through high school. So I learned, kind of the standard fare there. But I started taking drum set lessons shortly after I started in school band in 5th grade. And that stuck. I really liked that. And so didn't really have a lot of outlets for it other than school band and just jamming with friends or whatever until more recent years. But that would have been, I started playing around age 10, I'd say.
Nice. So how do you get your drum set kicks now?
With the bass.
Okay.
With the kick drum.
Yes.
With the
Yes.
kick. Okay, the
bass.
pedal. That's
Good job,
how it
Adela.
works. I've never realized. Yeah.
That's right. It kind of goes back to how I started in pipe band, is because I didn't have a drum set at the time. And so the natural outlet was to go back to what I knew before with pipe band, which was great and it still is great. But eventually I started going to church probably 24 years ago now. And a short time after that, they wanted to start creating a band. And they had a set of electronic drums there to play. So I tried to start shaking off the rust and playing there. And then over time, I was able to afford to get my own drums to keep at home to use. And blink of an eye, and now I've been playing church band drums for over 20 years. And it's wonderful because I get to play every week. We never seem to have another drum set guy in the church to want to share duties. And that's okay because I love to do it. So I've been doing that for over 20 years. It's great because I don't have to haul my drums around. I don't have to stay up late in smoky bars, anything like that. And if you drop your stick or make a mistake in a church, yeah, they're pretty forgiving about it. So that's nice.
They don't yell at you and throw beer at you. And
yeah, or if you're in your kilt and you're in a bar, people try to like lift up your kilt and look under there and stuff like that. So,
by the way, I've heard drum set and drum kit. Which one is it?
it's both. I think most people call it drum kit now. I think the word kit sounds funny. It sounds like kitten or something. So I prefer drum set. But maybe it's just because I'm over 50. I don't know.
Well,
I don't think anybody would really give you much grief if you say drum kit or drum set. There's also kick drum and bass drum. I call it bass drum. Some people insist on calling it kick. And I understand why they call it kick, but I mean, I don't kick my drum. So I just call it bass drum.
Must be doing it wrong then.
Yeah.
I know. I don't have that like heavy metal mentality, I guess, where you got to kick your drum and beat them all hard and stuff. So
yeah, you got to smash them after every set.
Yeah, let's do that. That's another $1,500 up in smoke.
I mean, that would attract a lot of people to your church if you smashed your drums every the end of every.
I have to consider that.
Every church service.
Yeah, either that or just pour alcohol on the cymbals and then light them on fire.
Yeah,
that'd be fun.
And then the alcohol just burns up and then it's done.
Yeah.
I wonder if the fire marshal would have trouble with that.
You don't have to know.
It's fine.
Yeah. Does the fire marshal go to church?
I
doubt it.
We have some fire department pipe band people that listen to our podcast, but I'm sure they would understand.
It's for the music.
Yeah.
It's for the music.
Yeah.
It's for the music.
So, I'm glad you said you prefer drum set because that works with the pun for the title of this video. So
we're all kit.
Yeah. That doesn't work.
Doesn't work.
Doesn't work.
So, are there any ways in which set drumming is similar to Scottish drumming, aside from drum?
Yeah, get pieces of wood and you hit a cylinder. No, it's interesting because while there's a lot in the same, there's also a lot of differences. Obviously, you need to have the right kind of technique. And the technique of using marching sticks on a marching snare is a lot different than using drum set sticks on a regular drum set. The rebound is much different. And pipe band in general, for the drumming, needs to feel kind of light and have kind of a swing to it. Now, if you're playing jazz music, some of that would translate a little better over. But for pop, rock, country, or whatever, where it's more upbeat, downbeat, 2 and 4 kind of playing, that doesn't translate over as well. But I think a lot of the rudimental things that you learn certainly apply across. And that's what I liked about drum set and pipe band, coming back into drumming in general and then starting those two. I mean, granted, it was probably 4 or 5 years between starting pipe band and then starting to play drum set again, but the shaking off the rust and then trying to improve, they feed off each other. One of the most noticeable things for me was, when you're playing your snare drum and you're standing in a circle, all you have to do is think about the notes and watching your lead tip, kind of hearing the music in general, but mostly just locking in. But all of a sudden it's time to march out and playing, and that can be tricky. Most of the repertoire tunes, probably the average person never really has to try too hard to match stepping on that. But I remember a few times we had to march in playing, I don't know, hornpipes or some really extreme, complicated set of beatings. And it's like, I don't even know exactly where the beat is in here. I just know I'm playing some crazy pattern. So playing the drum set and then playing to that, they apply because you basically need to have limb independence. You got to turn on your feet, say start, left foot start, and then right foot, you follow it and repeat. And that's all the thought you're going to give it, because you have to focus on playing this part. And doing drum set, I think, made that easy for me, or easier, on those really complicated pieces of music to march to. Whereas it's okay, I just got to turn my feet on to walk and not think about it. And that's what good drum set playing is all about. It's being able to have different limbs doing different things without thinking about it. So they definitely feed back and forth and help each other. The better I got with independence behind the drum set allowed me to be that much more independent in the circle with the pipe band. And even if I didn't have to focus on where my feet go necessarily, because we're standing still, just that extra awareness and brain capacity to take in different inputs and process it, I think it really helped. So it feeds back and forth. There was something else I was going to say, and it escaped me while I was babbling.
The other thing that I think is really interesting too is just drum set is kind of what I've noticed, at least. There's kind of like a community behind that too. There's definitely a pipe band community, but I don't know, it's a thing where you can connect with people when you're like, oh yeah, we're all drummers. You know, I don't know. I've heard you talk about your Phoenix area drummers, right. Friends, and I'm like, There's people that like only have one thing in common, that like, let's talk about drums.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, to your point, the pipe band has, a family effect when you're at the games and you have the other bands around. You just instantly have something in common with somebody, and then it's fun to, watch the just attendees kind of wander around and just be confused and whatever, but yet we're in the bands, we're over here, we know what's going on and talking and having a good time. But I think drumming in general has always had a really big community behind it, even before the days of social media. It was very, very popular, and still is today, for drummers to take little tours of clinics and master classes, when you never really heard a lot about that from other instruments. But drummers have always been big on that. They always want to learn from each other. So much of drumming is improvised, and you associate that mostly with jazz, but even in the rock and pop and country, hardly anybody except for big progressive bands like Dream Theater or Rush will sit down and actually write out drum parts. It's listen to the music, apply your musical sense to it, and give the music what it needs. Does it just need to keep a beat? Does it need some crescendoing? Does it need some power? Does it need to lay back? Does it need to get funky? What does it need to do? And so drummers have always, I think, had that connection to talk to each other, to exchange ideas and figure out and learn. And that just continues today, again, with that Facebook group. If you're in the Phoenix area drummers. It's just been great to have all these people with all these very different interests of styles of music, their level of expertise from beginners up to professionals and everything in between, all just getting together and sharing information and learning from each other. But that reminded me of what I wanted to say before about comparing and contrasting drum set to pipe band. Is pipe band, it's all scored out, every single note, every stroke, every stick height, the dynamics, all of that is precisely scribed out, and it has to be executed precisely the same across your snare line. And then thinking about what I just said about drum set, when I'm playing my drum set at church, for example, I get a song, I listen to it, somebody somewhere, because it's a cover band. We don't write our own music, it's a cover band. So you listen to the original and then you emulate it. The drummer emulates the part. Sometimes, listen to it once, a super experienced drummer could say, oh yeah, I could literally play note for note what that person's playing. But that's rarely required or necessary, especially in a worship setting where there's just so much variety out there. And there are some stars out there that you play their music, but for the most part, it's just a song. And that allows you to, because there's no written part, so long as you're using your musical sense to, again, give the music what it needs, you're free to do what you want. And so for me, I go from the precision of every little stick movement is scripted to being completely free. And I love having that variety, the two extremes, as part of my typical drumming routine on any given week. Really enjoy that.
That is something that I think is interesting when you, because I came from an orchestra background playing cello for so many years, and it's like going from that to playing at church where it's like you're not part of an orchestra, it's just you, and you're not part of a drum corps, it's just you, and you just, not every time you play it, it's going to be the same. It's like,
but nobody has to know.
But nobody has to know as long as you're making good music.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, I do craft certain things for songs if we do them a few times that I want to keep this part like this and this part like this. And there's certain, pieces that I want to make sure I do exactly the same or pretty close every time. But for the most part, a trained ear could sit and listen to that and say, okay, that's a lot different from this part because of this and that. And that's, again, what's so brilliant. It's just not a jazz, which is a completely improvised thing over a basic form for all the musicians. But for drumming in those worlds, it's still very improvised.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So what do you like most about drumming in general?
In general, I just think that the act of making music and playing music is just such a surreal feeling. It can make the world disappear around you, and sound is just so strange when it's in a musical sense. I mean, because we can see with our eyes, we can smell, we can touch things, but it's almost like music takes on, when you're really into it, more. It encompasses all your senses and then far more, to me. When you're just really making good music, whether it's in the pipe band circle or in a church band or a bar band, whatever, an orchestra with your cello, there's just no better feeling than anything I've ever experienced. And then especially in those two contexts for me, is I'm making music with my friends. And so I can look around, if I'm not just completely lost in the music, I can look around and see my friends smiling or determined face if we're playing our hard competition set or whatever it is. But just that satisfaction of making music is the singular most wonderful thing. Add the friend component to it, and the practices and performances and competitions and all that stuff. It just adds a whole nother layer to it.
Yeah.
What do you think is the biggest challenge with Scottish drumming in comparison to other types of drumming?
Well, just comparing and contrasting the drum set would clearly be or at least the type of music that I play on my drum set would be the precision and the complex rudimentary execution. The technique in order to really play the good music or the harder music in pipe band is unforgiving. I mean, you can have bad technique and push and muscle up to a certain point, but there's definitive barriers that any person's going to hit if you have bad technique. So working that technique and perfecting it and keeping it going is really hard. Now, it takes incredible technique to play really good drum set too. Don't get me wrong. But for the type of music I play, if I didn't get any better technique wise on my drum set, I could still probably do that gig for as long as I wanted it. Now, if I wanted to try to truly branch out and do something more than just supporting music, because drumming in most musical contexts to me is a supporting feature. It keeps the beat, but also adds texture and other musical elements. But if I wanted to try to take Mike Mangini out and knock him over the head and take over the Dream Theater job, that would require more talent and skill that even if I could quit my job and practice for 10 years and then go try out for Dream Theater, I'd still never even come close, because of the knowledge that it takes to create and play the parts that he does in that musical context. So for me, it's the technique on the hands and the execution of the music. You also get just the musical styles are so different. I mean, the first time I heard a Strass Bay, my head exploded. I mean, what is this heavy light, medium light, and how come the beats get stretched? How do you stretch a beat? You know, what do you mean you don't just go 1, 2, 3, 4? It just blows my mind. So you have to really just internalize and immerse yourself in the genre to really fully appreciate all the components that it deals with.
I was remember something I was going to ask you. So, in musical influences, you've name dropped some other drummers and bands. Let's talk about any musical influences that influence. Okay, how am I trying to ask this question?
Who is your biggest musical influence?
Yes, that.
Okay. I didn't prepare for this mentally, but I talk about it from time to time. So as a drummer, I would say that there's a handful of drummers that had the biggest influence on me, A, as a drummer, and B, just as someone who tries to play music using drums and appreciating music in general. Probably my single biggest drumming influence was a drummer named Steve Smith. He is most known for having played with the band Journey for many years, and actually recently came back to Journey a couple of years ago. At 60 plus years old, playing a full rock concert every night is pretty impressive. But just something about his style. He was highly trained. He went to Berklee School of Music. So he was extremely musical, had extreme chops, but just amazing sensitivity for the music. And I find that to this day, there's always a little bit of Steve Smith trying to come out of my meager hands and feet at any given time. There's a whole bunch of other drummers. I mean, all the big names that any drummer would list back from the old jazz standards, like the Buddy Rich and Gene Krupas. You know, listen to some of them. You know, Steve Smith's biggest influence was a man named Tony Williams, who played primarily in the 60s and 70s. He was playing for Miles Davis at age 17. He was just a freak of nature. Then tons of modern guys. I mean, Neil Peart died about a year ago with Rush. And, you know, I came to know them around 7th or 8th grade and grew up with Rush songs and that crazy drumming just blowing my mind all the time. Then there's tons of modern guys. And again, it goes back to the whole thing about drummers with their community of always just trying to learn from each other. I think probably all musicians, but I definitely say most drummers, you know, if they listen to any drummer and stop and really listen, they're going to be picking up something and taking it with them in their collective consciousness with their drumming. You know, as a guy who doesn't have a big outlet, or I'm not a particular talent with a certain band that has a certain style, you know, I don't really think I have a very defined style so much, but yet, like I mentioned earlier, I can hear, to the extent that I can execute certain things, certain drummers that I've loved in my lifetime try to come out. But in addition to drumming, I mean, I would even say, and this might even be sacrilegious to some drummers, but I think some of my favorite musicians of all time aren't even drummers. When I was exploring some drummers for jazz about 10, 15 years ago, I started listening to some of the jazz greats like John Coltrane and Miles Davis, two of the biggest names. That's a great place to start exploring a catalog, because I wanted to hear their drummers. Elvin Jones for Coltrane and Tony Williams for that period for Miles Davis. But as much as I love that and dissected and learned from it, I spent more time just mesmerized by John Coltrane and Miles Davis themselves. And if I had to list the top 10 musicians, sure, there's going to be some drummers in there, But there's going to be other instrumentalists who are going to come on top of most drummers just for their sheer brilliance, and that is just undeniable. That to me just speaks even louder than any drumming situation could.
Now our
I hope
listeners
that
have,
answered your question.
yeah, that's perfect. Our listeners now have some listening material other than just our podcast, because we know this is all you listen to.
Right.
Yeah.
I love jazz. My dad played jazz records for me when I was a kid, mostly big band from like the 40s and 50s. And I liked it, but it wasn't until about 15, 20 years ago where I stopped and started exploring more of that on my own. First to just listen to some drummers to check them out. And then just because I fell in love with the musicians and the product as a whole. So I like to think that I listen to a fairly wide range of music.
And that includes Scottish music. So that
Yes.
broadens your horizons too.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah, when I first got into the band, I listened to nothing but pipe band CDs for several years just to try to immerse myself in the genre.
We might have to do an episode on pipe band CDs in the future.
Yeah.
CDs.
CDs.
People don't have CDs anymore.
Pipe band, Spotify.
Pipe band
lists.
things.
Well, right there next to me, I've got probably 500 CDs, and in that door behind me, I've probably got 200 records. So
Nice.
That's
That's a lot.
buy the CD and don't stream it. Support the artists that you like.
They're still
They don't get much for streaming. Buy the CD. It sounds better. And then you can loan it to somebody. Or if you don't like it anymore, you can just sell it. Once it's on your computer in digital form because you downloaded it, it's done.
That might be illegal. I don't
Okay,
know.
rant over.
I don't know.
to buy
What?
CDs.
No, but to like download them to your. I don't know.
That's
I don't know
not
how-
illegal.
I don't know how legal.
Did you ever have an iPod when you were a kid and some
I mean,
iTunes?
yeah, but like,
Jeez.
If you keep the CD, it's perfectly legal. Now, if you buy the CD, download it, and then sell it, that's probably not the most ethical thing in the world to do.
Yeah.
And that's why I still have all my CDs.
that's what I was getting at.
Better
whatever.
Better than just downloading it, I guess.
True.
That's
All
just
right.
me.
So, getting back to pipe band. Is this my question or your question?
You know what? I'm gonna ask it.
Sure.
What do you like most about pipe band in general?
In general, I think for probably the first half of my time there, I would say I just love playing music. It's a wonderful genre. It's different. It's complex, yet still very musical. But I think during the latter half, it's going to be more about what I talked about last week with just the relationships with people, the leadership opportunities to help other players, connect and grow together so that we can do great things.
Yeah. That seems to be what a lot of people say is they love the people in it. Which
Yeah,
it's a community in itself.
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah, it's just like any community, you got some people you don't love, but a lot that you do.
Well, some people may be hard to love. Let's put it
Yes,
that way.
let's say it that way.
But I think we've just been really lucky with Mesa over my time there. Is just great people. There's been a few interesting characters pass through briefly. We'll call it that. But those folks usually don't last very long. Just because they're so out in left field. But by and large, it's just a big family, and I love it.
Yeah, I agree. All right. The hardest question that we will ask you or ask anyone else. So, due to the pandemic, lots of people, including probably ourselves, are struggling with getting up the motivation to practice. And you somehow, Todd, you've been one of the people that has managed to week in and week out always tune into the Zoom or to the whatever we're doing. Do you have any advice for anyone who's struggling with motivation right now?
Well, full disclosure, I too have had immense problems with motivation since COVID started. I don't practice as much as I should. In fact, I frequently go way too long, several weeks without even touching my sticks. But to your point, when we had Zoom practices, I always came. When we have our in-person practices, I think I've missed once since we started back up. And that was only because I was coming back from vacation. Again, for me, there's so many facets to why I play in a pipe band. And I think this year is proving even more than maybe the last 10 years that for me, it's about my friends. All you people in the band are my friends and my family. And even if I'm going to go up there and try to slap my hands, say, play something, at least I get to be with my friends. And keeping up the habit of going to practice. And even though I'm not practicing as much as I should be, when I do, I mean, it's something. And it'll keep that habit and that just process going during this whole time. I know there's going to be things, for example, just going back to the office to work when the time comes. I'm out of the habit. Now I'm very accustomed to being at home. So it's going to be hard to go back to the office. So if I wasn't going to practice, if I wasn't picking up my sticks, if I wasn't doing anything musical or anything like that at all, and you take basically a year off, it's going to be hard to come back. You're not going to want to go back to practice on Friday nights for our band or any other night for anybody else. And I think that at least doing the bare minimum will keep enough juices flowing that when it does come time to kick back in the high gear, I'll be much better prepared to do it than if I just decided I wasn't going to do anything until COVID was over. So it's hard for me to lecture or give any stronger advice. You guys did a great episode last week, kind of taking the just do it to the next level. And I think I like the advice you gave. You know, I'm going to set small goals. I'm going to keep my sticks and pad out where I can readily grab them, even if it's only for a minute to just run through some exercises. And I think that's going to help. So I'll use your advice and say that that's what I would recommend.
Did you get a note card? Do you have a note card made up?
I haven't done that yet. See? Motivation.
Whatever works for you.
Mm-hmm. Some is better than none.
Yeah.
Exactly.
One is better than zero.
Yes, non-zero days. It's a non-zero
Yeah.
2021.
There you go. Non-zero.
If someone's listening to this, you have no idea what we're talking about. Well, you should have listened to that episode.
Go back and listen to it.
We're just constantly roasting people who aren't listening.
That's what they get for not listening.
I mean, true.
Tough crowd you guys are.
Well, I think that's all we have for you today, Todd. Thank you again for being on the show. This was
Really fun.
Yeah, it's been fun. It's been good.
It's my pleasure.
Perspective.
Trying to support you guys best I can. So
We appreciate it.
appreciate the work you're doing for this and see nothing but bright future for the Pod Band Pipecast.
And it's energizing, especially, you know, at a time where we're all kind of struggling with energy. It's energizing to just talk about pipe band for a half hour, an hour, or whatever.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it is.
All right, listeners at home, tune in next week for even more Podband Pipecast. And let us know what you thought of Todd's episodes. Do you like drummers? We hope you do. Comment.
Be nice, please.
We heart drummers or something. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks for listening, everyone. If you enjoyed this show, then support us on Patreon for exclusive content as well as the video of us recording this. We'll have special exercises we'll be writing as well as tips and tricks with tenor drumming and other instruments to come. Subscribe to us on YouTube for some tenor tutorials and possibly other tutorials later on. And like us on Facebook at Podband Pipecast.